Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. She said she was pursuing a PhD. That she needed space. That she was working late. For nearly a decade, I supported her through everything, emotionally, financially, and legally. What I didn't know was that for 7 of those years, my wife was secretly living with another man, while still using me as her husband on paper. I only found out after she left and tried to take half of everything I owned. I just want to share the story of my absurd marriage. It's so outrageous that I still have a hard time believing that this actually happened to me. This post is a bit long, but I already condensed it as much as I could. I can probably write a book on this if I wanted to. Note, this is a 100% true story. It is not fiction and definitely not AI generated. Happy to provide evidence to the moderators if needed. My ex-wife and I were married for almost 9 years, but we only lived together for about 1.5 years. She didn't live with me because she was studying for PhD and busy looking for employment. In November 2022, she abruptly wanted a divorce and asked for half of my assets and spousal support. In April 2023, I accidentally found a Chick-fil-A cup in my garage with the name of a man that I never heard of. After several months of investigation, I found out that the man is her boyfriend from when they were in China, and they have been living together whenever the wife was not with me, in multiple cities across the United States. Almost everything this woman ever told me were lies. In addition, both the woman and the man are incredibly strange and secretive. A lot of what they did is beyond my imagination and comprehension. Who are they? What are they doing in the United States? I got dragged into a legal battle with this person that I hardly knew, and it took a tremendous toll on me mentally, physically, and financially. Background: the two of them and I were born in the same city in China, but I never met them when I was in China. I came to the United States with my parents when I was in grade school, and I have lived in California since. I currently work in the tech industry in Silicon Valley. The woman used to work for a consulting firm in Shanghai. She came to the United States in 2012 to study for PhD in the East Coast. We met online shortly after she came to the US, were in a long-distance relationship for more than a year, and got married in January 2014. Up until the end of 2024, she never had a full-time job in the United States. The man and the woman were high school classmates. He used to work for the Chinese Navy and then a tech company in Shanghai. He came to the United States in 2015 to study for PhD in Virginia. He later worked for a semiconductor company in Silicon Valley. For the remainder of this post, I will refer to the woman as Paris and the man as Sharik. Disclaimer: Paris and Sharik are not their real names. The marriage before we were married, Paris told me multiple times she planned to drop out of the PhD program after completing the master's requirements, and then move to California in summer 2014 and look for a job. Shortly after we were married, Paris told me she was making very good progress in her PhD, and it would be a shame to drop out. She said she wanted to complete the degree, and she could probably finish in less than 4 years. What she said made sense, and I wanted to be a supportive husband, so I agreed. Around the same time, she also told me she found a summer internship at Baidu in Shanghai, so she can't spend summer 2014 with me in California. In summer 2015, Paris again went to intern at Baidu in Shanghai. After returning, she confirmed that the upcoming school year will be her final year, and that she will come to California as soon as she graduates. Summer 2016 came around and Paris had not graduated, but she said she's almost done. It is very common for PhDs to take more than 4 years, so I didn't suspect anything. She told me she didn't lease an apartment for the upcoming school year because she will be graduating soon. Instead, she lived in the living room of a friend's apartment. From that point forward, she always told me she would graduate in a couple months whenever the topic came up. It's pretty common for PhDs to be delayed, so I still didn't suspect anything. During this time, Paris no longer allowed me to visit her on the East Coast, because she's living in her friend's living room, so it's inappropriate and inconvenient for me to stay here. She did, however, come visit me in California several times during this period, but some of those trips were also for her USCIS appointments. In April 2018, Paris finally moved to California. She still hasn't graduated, but she said her advisor allowed her to work on her dissertation in California. For the remainder of 2018, she went to the East Coast several times to meet with her advisor, and was away for 2 to 3 weeks each time. In November 2018, Paris said she will go to the East Coast one last time for her defense. I wanted to attend her defense, but she won't let me because that will put too much pressure on her. After she graduated, in December, she went vacationing in Miami with friends. I was pretty upset about this because I already planned a family vacation during Christmas which had to be cancelled. Paris was busy job searching after returning to California. In May 2019, she said she accepted an offer from a company in San Mateo, but she won't tell me the name of this company. She just said it's a small company that I probably never heard of. On May 20, 2019, Paris left home while I was at work, only leaving a note on the dining table saying she went on a road trip. A few days later, she sent me a text saying she was in Portland, Maine. I tried calling her multiple times but no answer. I was very angry. I had been trying to plan a family vacation for the past year, but she's always busy, yet she had several vacations without me during this time. What am I to her? I seriously contemplated separation. On June 1, 2019, Paris called me telling me that she's pregnant. I was ecstatic after hearing this. We have been trying to have a child since the day we were married, and now the child is finally here. Thoughts of separation were completely out the window. Paris said she was in New York at the time, but she's afraid to fly home due to the pregnancy. She went to Washington, D.C. the next day to stay with a friend, and saw a doctor. She didn't return to California until June 18, 2019. After returning home, Paris said she has postponed the start date of her new job in order to care for the unborn baby. On August 27, 2019, Paris told me she actually hasn't graduated, and her advisor is now telling her to get her act together and go back to the East Coast to finish, or she can forget about her degree. She said her advisor also found her a research assistant job at University C, which is about 50 miles from her school, so she can support herself. I was very angry that she lied to me, but she's pregnant, and it's hard to ask her to give up her degree, so I still let her go. Paris left for the East Coast the next day. However, she didn't live near her school, or near University C, rather she lived next to University D, which is about 10 miles away from University C. Her reason was she's pregnant, and University D Hospital is the best hospital in the area. In January 2020, my parents and I all went to the East Coast to welcome the birth of our child. Just 1 week after our daughter was born, Paris started to push us to go back to California, claiming that she can take care of the child by herself. I stayed on the East Coast till mid-February, but my parents insisted on staying longer to take care of their grandchild, and they stayed until March 5, 2020. On March 8, 2020, just 3 days after my parents returned to California, Paris brought our daughter to my parents' house in Sacramento, saying that the child was sick and she didn't know what to do. COVID already started at this time, many companies already started WFH, and there were rumors that schools would close soon. We asked Paris to stay in California, but she insisted on going back to complete her degree. She said she's almost done and will return to California in April. I lived in my parents' house during COVID so I could care for the newborn. We asked Paris multiple times to return to California, but she kept on coming up with excuses for not returning, such as not feeling well, not safe to fly during the pandemic, etc. Paris finally returned to California at the end of September, but she won't live with us in Sacramento, rather she lived by herself in our Bay Area home. She said she really needed to focus on her job search, and there were too many distractions in Sacramento. She said she would try to spend a few days every week in Sacramento to help take care of our daughter. In reality, she came to Sacramento about once a month, and only stayed about 2 days each time. Paris spent the next year job searching, but couldn't find anything. By the end of 2021, COVID was getting better and there were rumors of RTO soon. In November, I talked to Paris about moving back to the Bay Area, but she vehemently opposed that idea, saying that I would disturb her job-searching efforts. My parents talked to her after hearing this, telling her that husband and wife should not be living separately for this long, and Paris was visibly upset after that conversation. About a week later, she told me she needed to go to China, because her father was ill, and her parents were also trying to sell a house under her name and needed her signature. I felt that the timing of this was a bit odd because at the time China had a 28 days quarantine policy, and plane tickets were very expensive and hard to get. But it is hard to say no given her reasons. On December 18, 2021, Paris left for China. Starting in January 2022, I would occasionally go work in the office, so I started living in my Bay Area home for a few days every couple weeks. In February, I started getting a lot of mail from Kaiser Permanente for Paris. I initially thought they were ads because we didn't even use Kaiser, so I just put them aside. On March 27, 2022, I received a postcard from Kaiser which read something like, "Thank you for visiting us." This looked suspicious, so I opened one of the previous mail pieces and it showed Paris went to Kaiser Fremont on February 7, 2022. She didn't go to China. I was thinking what every man would have thought in that situation. I called Paris and made her come home. She swore she was not having an affair. In fact, she was angry that I would even think she would do something so disgusting. She said she stayed in her parents' friend's house, because they went to China and needed someone to watch their home. She offered to show me letters from her parents as proof if I didn't believe her. I was quite skeptical of what she said, but I had no evidence, and she looked so assertive. I then thought of our daughter. She was sick at the time. I didn't want her to grow up in a broken family, so I chose to believe what Paris said. From there, I continued to split my time between Sacramento and the Bay Area, while Paris continued her job search. In 2022, many tech companies had layoffs and hiring freezes. It was a tough job market, so I didn't suspect anything. In July, she got a contractor position through the help of one of my mother's friends. I initially thought the job was 40 hours per week, but a couple months later I learned that she was only working 10 hours per week. Paris said she was still looking for a full-time job while working part-time. The divorce on November 28, 2022, Paris left home at 9 a.m. to work at a Starbucks, and didn't come home until around 7:10 p.m. After coming home, she started arguing with me for no reason and then started throwing things. Then she suddenly screamed, "I want a divorce," and left home at around 7:20 p.m. I was completely baffled and had no idea what just happened. I thought she couldn't be serious about a divorce. We haven't had any disagreements recently. Just a couple days ago we were celebrating Thanksgiving in Sacramento, and we're planning to take our daughter to Disneyland for her 3rd birthday. Why would she suddenly want a divorce? Around 11:30 p.m., she came back with a rental car and started moving her stuff out. At that point I realized she was serious. She still refused to tell me what happened, and she left at around 12:30 a.m. The next evening, Paris came back to get some of her remaining stuff, and we talked for about an hour. She said she wanted a divorce because I didn't treat her well. Her examples were I seldom called her and I won't talk to her after coming home from work. Both allegations were completely false. Even if they were true, how come she never said anything before? Then she said she had been planning for this divorce for several years, and had been consulting divorce lawyers since 2019. That sentence really sent chills down my spine. So she had been plotting against me, and was just pretending all these years. From there, she gave me her proposal of asset division, essentially wanting half of my stuff, and justified her demands by throwing all kinds of legal jargon at me. She was clearly well prepared. The next few days were the darkest of my life. This was so sudden and so unexpected, it was hard for me to even digest what just happened. I couldn't eat or sleep, or do anything else but to think about what had just happened. She planned this for years, and she is clearly going after my money. I started looking at what happened around 2019. In December 2018, she got her green card, and I started my current job around the same time. My 4-year work anniversary is coming up soon. Initial RSU spans 4 years, and stock price went up quite a bit during COVID. This means my income will be having a large cliff soon. No wonder she kept asking about my income in the last couple years. This started to make sense now. For the next few months, Paris constantly threatened and harassed me over the phone and texts, which brought additional trauma to the distress I suffered at the time. She came up with all kinds of false allegations, such as accusing me of abusing our daughter. She even said she already reported me to the police and the CPS, which I later learned were lies. In fact, a social worker from the CPS told me that I don't need to respond to her messages since we are separated. So I started to ignore her calls and texts. Only then did the amount of harassment started to decrease. At the same time, I started to analyze her behaviors and everything she said. I felt that she is not acting alone, there is someone behind her driving all this. But who is this person? By analyzing my electricity bills, I learned that starting around March 2021, Paris has not been living in my Bay Area home whenever I was not there. This explained why she was so opposed to me moving back to the Bay Area at the end of 2021, and in 2022 often told me to spend more time with our daughter in Sacramento. Where was she? It's probably the same place she stayed when she went to China. By analyzing my phone bills, I also verified Paris indeed started contacting her current lawyer in 2019. The paramour on April 10, 2023, I accidentally found a Chick-fil-A cup while cleaning my garage. The cup had Sherrick's name and phone number printed on it. Who is this person? After several months of investigation, I found that Paris has been living with Sherrick since 2016. Sherrick came to the United States in summer 2015 for PhD in Virginia, studying GPU architectures, and he just graduated in August 2023. However, he only lived in Virginia until 2019 and has lived in multiple states since. Paris has lived with Sherrick majority of the time. Paris lived with Sherrick in Virginia from March 2016 to April 2018. This was the time that she said she was close to graduation and lived in a friend's living room. Truth is, she was not even going to school during those times. Paris lived with me in California from April 2018 to August 2019, but she was often away to see her advisor or vacationing. I am sure she was with Sherrick all those times she was away. Paris lived with Sherrick near University D from August 2019 to January 2020. The apartment that my parents and I lived in when we went to the East Coast for our daughter's birth was actually Sherrick's apartment. In March 2020, after Paris sent our daughter to my parents' house, she went to Longmont, Colorado to live with Sherrick. In late 2020 and early 2021, Paris and Sherrick lived together in my Bay Area home. In April 2021, Sherrick purchased a condo in Fremont. They lived together in Fremont until Sherrick sold the condo in November 2022. After the divorce, Paris and Sherrick lived in the same apartment complex in South Bay. After that, they lived together in several other addresses in the Bay Area. In Sherrick's dissertation, submitted August 2023, he thanked his girlfriend Paris for her support and encouragement. I was not surprised that Paris had been cheating, but I was shocked that the relationship goes back to 2016. Who is this Sherrick? Their schools are hundreds of miles apart. How did they know each other? Why did they start cohabiting so quickly? Did they already know each other in China? I started investigating Sherrick in China, and they indeed knew each other long before they came to the United States. Sherrick came from a prominent family. His father is a senior officer in the Chinese military. He and Paris were high school classmates in China. He attended one of the best universities in China for bachelor's, and majored in electronic information science and technology. Then he went to a naval college for master's, and studied mine-detecting sonar. After graduation, he worked in the Chinese Navy for a couple years, and then he worked for a tech company in Shanghai. So this explained why Paris, interned in Shanghai in 2014 and 2015, and she never went to Shanghai again after Sharik came to the United States. Paris's version of the story: after Paris knew that I found out about Sharik, she did tone down her demands. I talked to her several times in 2024 to negotiate a settlement, and Sharik obviously came up during the conversations. Her version of the story is below. Paris said she had known Sharik since she was 11. Paris admitted that Sharik was her boyfriend when they were in China, but they broke up in 2010. The reason was Paris was planning to come to the United States, but Sharik couldn't come because he was in the military. Paris admitted that she didn't intern for Baidu in 2014 and 2015, rather she worked for her previous employer in Shanghai. She claimed she did not live with Sharik when she was in Shanghai. Paris admitted she had been in contact with Sharik after he came to the United States. In fact, she picked him up from the airport and helped him to settle down. Paris admitted she lived with Sharik in Virginia between 2016 and 2018. She said she no longer had financial aid in 2016, so she didn't have money to lease an apartment. She feared that I would have asked her to move to California if she told me, and she won't be able to complete her degree. Sharik offered temporary shelter, so she moved in with him. They lived in the same room, but she claimed that nothing happened between them. Paris denied she was with Sharik whenever she was away from California between April 2018 and August 2019. She said she really did go see her advisor. Paris admitted the apartment she lived near University D in 2019 was Sharik's apartment. She said she couldn't lease an apartment because she had no income, so Sharik leased it for her. She said Sharik didn't live there, he lived in his advisor's lab during that time. Paris admitted she lived with Sharik in Longmont in 2020. The reason was that she must finish her dissertation in 2020. Had she lived in California, then I would have asked her to care for our daughter, and she wouldn't have time to work on her dissertation. Paris denied Sharik lived in my Bay Area home in late 2020 and early 2021. Paris denied that she lived in Sharik's Fremont home in 2021 and 2022. She said she went to Sharik's home every day but still returned to my home every evening. As for why she went to Sharik's home every day, she said that's none of my business. Paris admitted she lived in Sharik's Fremont home when she went to China. She said she wanted to travel with friends, but was afraid that I won't let her go, that's why she lied about going to China. Paris admitted that Sharik picked her up and took her to his home on November 28, 2022, the night of the divorce. Paris denied that she is still with Sharik after the divorce. She even said she never liked Sharik, and made a bunch of disparaging remarks about him. As for why Sharik claimed that she is his girlfriend in his dissertation, she said she doesn't know and has no control in what Sharik thinks. Paris said she wanted to divorce soon after we were married because she felt that marriage life didn't suit her. She accused me of controlling her life, and said she had no freedom when she's with me, but Sharik let her do whatever she wanted. I asked if that's true, then why didn't she file sooner, and she said she hadn't graduated and couldn't support herself, she needed to graduate and find a job before filing for divorce. I am not going to comment on her story. You be the judge. Who are they? During the investigation, it's hard to not notice both Sharik and Paris are incredibly strange people, and a lot of what they do defies common sense. They don't look like typical students or typical adulterers. I really can't figure out who they are. Some of their abnormal behaviors are, both individuals took 8 years to complete their PhD, but both left school after just 4 years. I looked up all other PhD students studied under their advisors, about 20 of them, and not one person took more than 5 years to graduate. Why did these two take 8 years? Why did both leave school 4 years before they graduated? Both individuals attended elite universities in China, and have PhD degrees. They are more than capable of making top wages in the United States, and they should know the basic moral principles. Why did they have to go through all these troubles to do something so despicable? They have known each other for more than 20 years, they are way past the honeymoon phase. Why did they have to go out of the way to be together all the time? This seems far too complicated for just doing the deed. Sharik seldom went to school when he was in Virginia. None of his colleagues from school knew anything about him, a few didn't even know he existed. What was he doing in Virginia? He didn't talk to his colleagues at all in school. Sharik moved frequently after leaving school in 2019. Other than the Fremont condo that he owned for 1.5 years, he didn't stay longer than half a year at any of his other addresses. Why is he always moving? Sharik is in close contact with several individuals with special backgrounds, such as individuals that work in the defense industry. How did he know these people? If Paris planned to be with Sharik all along, then why did she have a child with me? This is just cruel. Also, Sharik doesn't mind? Paris spent the majority of the pregnancy with Sharik near University D. She didn't have a job at the time, but she was out, working, every day, even on the day of the delivery. What were they doing next to University D? Our daughter is now 5 years old, but Paris has never cared for her, she seldom even comes to see her. She abandoned the child when she was less than 2 months old just so she can be with Sharik in Colorado. What kind of mother can be this cold-hearted? Paris has a PhD in a STEM major, but she couldn't find a job in Silicon Valley after multiple years of job search. The judge has placed a seek work order on her, which she just ignores. Why won't she work? Paris is always very busy. Prior to the divorce, she was always in her room, working, whenever she's home, sometimes at 4 a.m. in the morning. But she never had a full-time job. What was she really doing? Paris called her parents almost every day, and often talked for hours. Who talks to their parents that much? Was she really talking to her parents? In 2017 and 2018, Paris went to Stanford University almost every day that she was in California, supposedly to work on her dissertation at the library, and sometimes she wouldn't come home until midnight. Paris didn't graduate until October 2020, she couldn't be writing her dissertation in 2017 and 2018. What was she really doing at Stanford? Paris said her previous employer in China still reached out to her from time to time for help on projects, because they couldn't find anyone else that could do them. What kind of employer would seek help from an ex-employee that left 10 years ago? What exactly can she do that is so indispensable? In addition, both individuals are extremely secretive, and investigating them was incredibly difficult. Their background reports contain nothing more than their address history. The address history for Paris is not even correct. Her report showed that she has been living with me since 2014. But she didn't live with me. Now I know why she has been using my address everywhere after we were married, and won't let me mail anything to her. She was trying to hide her whereabouts. Paris also refused to answer the majority of our discovery questions, and none of the questions pertaining to Sharik. She was sanctioned by the judge for this, yet she still refused to answer. Why can't she answer those questions? Some more oddities. Paris seldom used my home Wi-Fi. She said she prefers Hotspot's Finity Wi-Fi, because our home internet was unstable. She also used this as an excuse to often work at libraries and coffee shops. It is true that my home internet was unstable, it disconnects for a few hours almost every day. I had Comcast come over several times and they weren't able to find anything wrong. Oddly, I have not had any internet issues after Paris left. Paris unplugged all my electronic devices whenever I was not home. She said it was to prevent fire. Paris has alerts set up on search engines, so she knows whenever someone searches for her name online. Paris constantly reminded me to not go through her stuff in her room, even though I never did. She moved all her stuff out the same night that she wanted the divorce. What exactly was in her room that she didn't want me to see? Paris would not tell me where she lives after the divorce. She also warned me multiple times to not investigate her. Exactly what is she afraid of? I am certain that the two of them are doing something shady. This is way too excessive for just adultery. But what are they doing? Lies. I think I am a fairly intelligent person and I am usually pretty good at spotting scams. I am still surprised that I was fooled for this long. First, I never thought there are people this immoral, especially someone with a PhD degree. I think I was a bit cautious in the first couple years of this marriage, but I really let the guard down after having the child. I never thought there are people that don't even care about their own children. Second, Paris is exceptionally good at lying. She doesn't just make up stories when needed, which is how most people lie, but she brainwashed me by continuously feeding me misinformation, and made me have a completely false perception of her. The contrast was really shocking when she revealed her true self after the divorce. Some examples are, Paris would tell me from time to time that some male friends were pursuing her, or some strangers tried to hit on her. Obviously she turned all of them down. She also told me stories of her previous relationships, and we gossiped about celebrity relationships and those of her friends. She always loathed at those people that were unfaithful, including her close friends. I always thought that she is someone that's open, honest, and faithful. Well, let's just say what she did was far worse than people that she despised. Paris always says she was just borrowing whenever she asked me for money, and would pay me back as soon as she gets a job. She told me numerous times that she is an independent woman, and does not want me to support her. In fact, she is even ashamed that she had to rely on me for medical coverage. She often told me that once she gets a job, she would pay a portion of our mortgage and family expenses. She said this as recently as 2 weeks before the divorce. I never really expected her to make too much financial contribution to the family, but I also never thought of her as a greedy person, and certainly didn't think she would take advantage of me. Boy, was I wrong. During our marriage, I had to be very careful whenever I talked to Paris, because she cried, with tears, whenever I said something that might sound slightly critical. I have always thought she is thin-skinned and has strong self-esteem. After I found out about Sharik, I chewed her out in every one of our negotiations, yet she didn't bat an eye and continued to ask for money after I was done. The shamelessness is just astounding. During our marriage, Paris pretended that she knew little about the United States, and she often made silly mistakes or forget things. She also asks some very childish questions, and acts cute. Just 2 days before the divorce, she was begging me to buy her bubble tea. This made me think she is just a simple and naive girl, and lowered my guards. But the fact is, she knows more about the United States than I do, and she has an excellent memory. Not to mention she is extremely calculated and deceptive. Paris is extremely meticulous with her lies. For example, to make me believe she was living with a female friend between 2016 and 2018, she often told me gossip about this roommate of hers, such as where she grew up, schools she attended, her boyfriend, her looks and figures, places they hang out, and etc. I never suspected the legitimacy of this roommate after hearing all these details. Little did I know she was actually living with Sharik in Virginia during that time. I did some research on this roommate. She does exist, and most of what Paris said about her were true, except they were not roommates. Most importantly, Paris is extremely tough mentally. When she lies, she always speaks with confidence, and doesn't appear the least bit guilty. Even when her lies were exposed, she still can keep her composure and quickly make up another story to cover up the lie. This was especially obvious during our recent negotiations. I obviously don't believe anything she says now, but I was fooled many times by her confidence and assertiveness during the marriage. I do wonder if Paris's lying skills are her natural abilities, or acquired via some training. Conclusion: this lawsuit lasted 2.5 years and it just ended about a month ago. Perhaps I will write another post at some point with more details on the whole process. The end result is I lost about 1/3 of my wealth. That's just direct loss. Indirect loss is impossible to estimate. Most importantly is the psychological trauma I had to go through, and all the years that I wasted on her. My lawyer said this is considered a good outcome under current laws. Perhaps so, but how is this good? How can I not feel angry, frustrated and disheartened? During this marriage, I have tried my best to be a good and supportive husband. To date, Paris still couldn't state exactly how I mistreated her. She, on the other hand, was just exploiting me. Other than giving birth to our daughter, everything else she did was anti-family. I don't believe Paris ever intended to have a family with me. She even stated that she has wanted a divorce since 2016, and she started consulting divorce lawyers in 2019, shortly after getting her green card. Paris was living with another man for the majority of this marriage, and lied to me on virtually everything. The lies I mentioned in this post were just a small fraction of the lies she told. This is a complete violation of the marital contract. Even during the times that she lived with me, she didn't do any housework or cared for the child. She was always busy writing her dissertation or job searching, which in hindsight were also lies, but I still don't know what she was really doing. She didn't fulfill any spousal obligations and had absolutely no contribution to the family. Despite all these, the so-called California family law worked in Paris's favor in almost every aspect. In particular, this so-called no-fault divorce basically doesn't matter what she did during the marriage, she is still entitled to my assets. What kind of logic is this? If everything is no fault, then what's the point of having laws? I understand it may be difficult to tell right and wrong in many family disputes, but that clearly isn't the case here, and what she did couldn't be more vile. The purpose of laws is to set social standards, protect public rights, and serve justice. Is infidelity, lying, and scamming the kind of values that our elected officials want to promote? The court that handled this case is called the Hall of Justice. Justice is to defend the good and punish the bad. Well, perhaps that's too much to ask for, but at least don't punish the good and reward the bad. I have asked Paris multiple times during our negotiations why she thinks she deserves such a large portion of my assets. She couldn't provide any good reasons, she just kept stating the law says she is entitled to my assets. Yeah, but this law is just utterly unfair and unreasonable. I suggest that the following changes be made. If one of the spouses cohabitates with a person of the opposite sex without the other spouse's knowledge, then the times of cohabitation should not count as a part of the marriage. If one of the spouses had major concealments or malicious lies which hurt the interest of the other spouse, then the non-offending spouse should be able to request a shortening of the marriage duration or receive financial compensation. If one of the spouses committed serious fouls during the marriage, then the non-offending spouse should not have to pay spousal support or legal fees to the offending spouse. There are about a dozen more changes that I would like to see happen to the existing family law, but the three listed above target what I feel are the most egregious and nonsensical. Part of the reason why I wrote this post is to vent. The past 2.5 years have been extremely difficult and depressing for me. More importantly, I hope what happened to me can get the attention of lawmakers so we can fix these loopholes. Governor Gavin Newsom, Senate President pro tempore Mike McGuire, Senate Leader Brian Jones, Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas, Assembly Leader James Gallagher, and other lawmakers in California and elsewhere, I hope you can see this and do something about it. I hope no one has to experience what I went through again.